Hi, everyone. Welcome to our devotion for Tuesday, March 2nd. The next few days of devotions are all part of one story. And so I'm actually recording those all at one time. That way I don't forget what I said from one time to the next. But I'm only going to give them to you one day at a time, and I hope you keep up with this with devotional readings day after day. We ended our reading of chapter 4 yesterday, and today chapter 4 was all about parables. Chapter 5 is all about healing stories. And chapter 5 begins with a story of that Gerasene demoniac. You might remember that story if I used words that you understood. That it's a story of Jesus and his disciples traveling to the other side of the sea to the land of the Gerasenes. And they're in a graveyard. They meet a man who's crazy and who says he has a legion of demons living in his body. And Jesus commands the demons to come out of the man, and they go into a flock of pigs. And the pigs run down the hill and go into the sea and are drowned. And supposedly that's the end of everything. And then the people in that community are even more frightened, because this guy that they had chained up and locked away in the graveyard because he was crazy, he's now in his right mind. All the demons are gone, and they have to figure out what to do with him. The first thing that they do is they ask Jesus and his disciples to leave, because he just killed off their whole flock of sheep. They didn't like that, or not sheep, pigs, right? Jesus, being Jewish, doesn't eat pigs, but the Gerasenes don't have that problem. And so now he's killed off their whole herd of pigs. So, no bacon for a year. And so Jesus and his disciples, they come back over to the Jewish side of the lake. And then we pick up where this story is. This is the same part of the chapter that we're going to see Jesus do these healings. And so the first part here for today, for Tuesday, March 2nd, verses 22 to 24. This is now after he's come back over the sea. One of the leaders of the synagogue, named Jairus, came, and when he saw Jesus, fell at his feet and begged him repeatedly, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she may be made well and live." So he went with him. And here ends the reading. To be continued tomorrow. Now, Mark is being a little bit sly here. One of the leaders of the synagogue is a Pharisee. And remember, we had talked a few days ago that Mark is writing this as trying to argue that Jesus' version of Judaism is better than the Pharisaic version of Judaism. And so Jesus and the Pharisees will get into these little arguments every now and then. It turns out that that's really what Pharisees used to do, is they used to like to get into little technical arguments back and forth with each other about what's the right way to do this, what's the wrong way. So it's not supposed to be as antagonistic as we usually read it. We usually read these as way more opposing sides than what they're really supposed to be. But here, Mark introduces Jairus, number one, by name. That usually means that the community Mark is writing this story to knew who he was, that Mark would drop his name in there. You see all through the gospel stories that there are stories of a leader of the synagogue, or the man in the land of the Gerasenes who was accompanied by demons. Mark doesn't bother with names. So every once in a while, when there's a name in one of the Gospels, it usually means there's a personal connection to this story. There's a reason that name is there. Maybe Jairus was living now in Rome, was part of that community. And when Mark writes the story and puts that name in there, he's doing that so that Jairus can stand up and say, yes, that was me. This really happened. Anyway, but Jairus, Mark introduces not as a Pharisee, although that name, that title would have been appropriate, but as one of the leaders of the synagogue. So this is one of the leaders of the gathering of the people. He's a teacher. He knows the laws. He knows how to live the laws, and he tries to help other people to live in the right way. But when Jairus sees Jesus, he's heard about all this stuff Jesus has done. And so he asks him to come with him and to lay Jesus' hands on Jairus' little daughter so that she may be made well. I mean, this is the loving act of a father who has reached that desperation point, right? There's other stories that we'll hear about Jesus' healing where, a person has spent all their money on doctors and they're now destitute, and finally they come to Jesus. And this isn't to say anything bad about doctors and nurses, because they do wonderful work, but even some ailments are beyond the skills and abilities. And so here Jairus is at that point where he needs more help, and he comes to Jesus for that. And I think it's remarkable that only on that claim, Jesus just goes with him. Jesus doesn't argue it. Jesus doesn't complain that you're taking away my time from doing this, that, or the other. Jesus just goes, right? Even this little daughter that honestly back in that culture probably meant very little in the world, right? Daughters didn't really help out on the farm. You only had to spend money to get them married off. Hopefully they got a good marriage, right? Little daughters didn't amount for much in the world. They didn't really count. But they did to Jesus, and Jesus went with them. Let's close in our prayer. Loving Jesus, bring healing and hope to our lives, to the church, and to the world. Take away our fears and prejudices as you open our hearts to the needs of others. Amen. And God bless you today.